Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing the ultimate how it works breakdown of how an ancient empire rose to absolute power. I mean, think about it. Around 220 BC, the Qin dynasty did the impossible. They literally ended centuries of brutal, fractured warfare and forged the very first unified, centralized empire in Chinese history. It's wild. So today, we're going to deconstruct the exact mechanics of how they pulled off this absolute juggernaut of a feat. Okay, let's dive into this. The big question we really need to answer here is how on earth did a small, kind of insignificant border state out in the Northwest manage to conquer the known world? You know, it's super tempting to look at history and just assume, oh, Qin won purely through brute military force. Or maybe they just had a lucky streak of really strong kings. But as the source material makes incredibly clear, that's a total myth. Actually, their victory was this calculated, multi-layered inevitability. It was driven by massive historical trends, radical institutional rewiring, actual geographical cheat codes, and, well, absolute ruthlessness. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're essentially going to treat the Qin state like a finely tuned, ruthless startup that achieved a total monopoly. First, we'll look at the economic tide of unification. Then, their insane geographic advantages, the internal war machine they built, the masterminds running their grand strategy, and finally, the rapid-fire domino effect of their final conquest. Let's get into it. Section 1. The Tide of Unification. Economic necessity and the will of the people. Right, so long before the very first Qin soldier marched east, there was this massive, overarching, historical and economic trend that was practically demanding unity. See, during the spring and autumn and warring states periods, the region saw a huge leap in productivity. Iron tools and ox plowing, they sparked a literal economic boom. But as regional trade shot up, it hit a massive brick wall. Imagine trying to run a modern economy, right? But every single time you cross a state line, bam, there's a new border checkpoint, the currency changes completely, and even the basic measurements for weight and length are totally different. It was massive gridlock. An integrated economy desperately needed a unified political and market system just to reduce those insane transaction costs and let resources flow freely. And you know, this economic pressure, it was matched by just intense psychological exhaustion. After hundreds of years of horrific, escalating warfare, and we're talking brutal fire attacks, deliberate flooding of entire cities, massive population decline, the common people were just done. They were desperate for peace. Like the philosopher Mencius famously said, the world will settle in unity. People just wanted to survive. So by driving toward unification, Qin was actually tapping into the deepest, most desperate wish of the general population. It gave them the social foundation they really needed to completely reshape the world order. Section 2. Geography of an empire. The fortress and the granary. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. Look, you can have all the ambition in the world, but if your starting location is terrible, you're gonna get crushed. Qin, though, they had what we can basically call geographical cheat codes. First up, the Guangzhong Plain. This acted as an impenetrable natural fortress, totally surrounded by mountains. To get in from the east, enemies had to squeeze through the Henggu Pass, which was the ultimate defensive choke point. So when Qin was weak, they could literally just shut the gates of Henggu Pass and hide safely behind their mountains. And when they were strong, they just pour right out into the eastern plains. Plus, they conquered the Bashu region down south, that's modern-day Sichuan, which gave them an infinite breadbasket and a river highway pointing straight at the underbelly of their rivals. And to completely supercharge that agriculture, they built the Zhengguo Canal right in their home base. This massive engineering project irrigated over 40,000 hectares of previously alkaline, totally useless land. To put that in perspective, that's so much food it virtually eliminated famine in the entire state. By turning their geography into an endless engine for military supplies, Qin ensured they could sustain a war effort way longer than any of their rivals ever could. Section 3. The ultimate war machine. Institutional reforms and the engine of state. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is, well, safe borders and lots of food are great, but Qin's true engine of state was forged through some radical reforms by a guy named Shang Yang. He completely gamified warfare by instituting a military meritocracy. This was a 20-rank social system. They actually stripped the old nobles of their hereditary privileges and basically said, look, you only get status through military merit. Imagine you're a poor peasant, or even a slave. Under this new system, if you go to battle and literally chop off an enemy soldier's head, you are legally entitled to a promotion, to land, and to servants, no questions asked. This unbelievable social mobility unleashed a ferocious hunger in the lower classes. It totally transformed the Qin army from a bunch of ordinary conscripts into a highly motivated, absolutely terrifying force of upwardly mobile warriors. Just compare this to the other 6 major states. While Qin is running this tight, centralized bureaucracy, driving total grassroots control, where every citizen's job is literally to farm in peacetime and fight in wartime, the eastern states are still totally bogged down by aristocratic nepotism. Their old noble families were constantly infighting and sabotaging any meaningful reforms just to protect their inherited wealth. It's like Qin was a modern, ruthless corporate machine competing against a bunch of outdated, bickering family businesses. Section 4, Masterminds and Grand Strategy, Navigating the Geopolitical Chessboard. Of course, a machine this powerful needs brilliant navigators. So what do masterminds like Shang Yang, Zhang Yi, Fan Zhu, and Li Si all have in common? None of them were originally from Qin. No way! Qin had this remarkably open-door guest policy. While the other states only promoted within their own royal bloodlines, Qin just said, hey, we don't care where you're from, if you have the talent, we have the job. It was brilliant. This incredibly pragmatic policy effectively drained the very best political, military, and diplomatic brainpower right out of their rival states and put them straight to work for Qin. One of those foreign masterminds, Fan Zhu, gave Qin its ultimate diplomatic playbook. It was a 3-step strategy, essentially boiling down to far-off friends, nearby enemies. Instead of trying to fight everyone at once, which is a terrible idea, Qin would send lavish gifts and form alliances with states far away, like Qi and Yan. This lulled them into staying totally neutral. Meanwhile, Qin concentrated all its military might on its immediate neighbors. And here's the kicker. Once they conquered a neighbor, they didn't just loot it and leave. They annexed it. They absorbed it into their empire, organically expanding their borders outward, step by step, without ever having to face a united front. And get this, they didn't just fight on the battlefield, they fought in the shadows too. Qin utilized what the sources call golden spies. They deployed these massive slush funds of gold just to bribe greedy enemy officials. It was a pure policy of subverting the enemy from the inside out. For example, when the state of Zhao had this brilliant general named Li Mu, who was actually successfully holding off the Qin army, Qin didn't beat him in combat. Nope, they just bribed a corrupt official in the Zhao court to whisper lies to the Zhao king. And it worked. It resulted in the king executing his own best general. Talk about self-sabotage. Qin's ruthless pragmatism ensured the enemy was rotting from the inside long before a single sword was swung. Let's move on and see how this all builds to the climax. Section 5, the final conquest. The dominoes fall. All right, by the time King Zong, who you might know later became Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, took the throne, all the pieces were perfectly in place. It was time to knock down the dominoes. The timeline of this final unification war is just a breathtaking 10-year blitzkrieg. It's the culmination of generations of meticulous planning. In 230 BC, the weakest neighbor, Han, falls first. Just 2 years later, Zhao's main forces are completely crushed. In 225, they literally divert the Yellow River to flood the capital of Wei, conquering it. In 2023, they mobilize a staggering 600,000 troops to completely overwhelm the massive southern state of Chu. Yan is swept away the very next year. And finally, in 221 BC, the distant state of Qi, isolated, totally outmaneuvered, and having watched literally everyone else fall, simply surrenders without a single fight. But it's absolutely vital to recognize that the speed of this collapse wasn't just Qin's doing. It was heavily accelerated by the Six States' own self-sabotage. Just like the later essays Su Sung wrote, the ruin of the Six States did not come from inferior weapons or poor tactics. The fault lay in bribing Qin. The eastern states suffered from some severe strategic short-sightedness. They constantly gave up land to appease Qin, which, only made Qin stronger. They lacked any strategic trust, constantly betraying each other instead of uniting against the obvious common threat. Their outdated systems just couldn't handle the existential pressure test that Qin applied. Which leaves us with a final thought to consider for today. We just watched how the Qin state transformed from a peripheral underdog into an absolutely unstoppable juggernaut. And they didn't do it with magic. They did it through structural, geographical, and psychological mastery. So the crucial point is this. If the Qin dynasty achieved the impossible by merging geographic advantage with a radical, gamified meritocracy and ruthless psychological warfare, how do these ancient machinations lay the hidden groundwork for how modern superpowers and massive organizations are built today? I mean, the technology has obviously changed, but the underlying anatomy of power, it might just be exactly the same. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep keep learning, and I'll see you next time.